our event this evening. Thank you so much for joining. We as brokers and many of you as sailors have probably run across a lot of people who say they want to drop their lines, move aboard, sell their house, sail around the world, or maybe just live in a marina for the rest of their life. So I wanted to just do this event tonight to do a reality check on what this involves, what the logistics are, and how it's a good idea to have a long runway for this so that you are prepared and ready and financially set up and logistically set up. So Jamie and Behan Gifford have been living aboard for 18 years and they cruise the world. Right now they're in Japan and they have a business called Sailing Totem, which is a basically consulting company for people who are at various stages of boating or moving aboard or doing major life-changing, making big life-changing decisions around being on the water. So we wanted to invite them to be our kind of main speakers tonight. And we want to invite you to prepare your questions, which we will entertain in the chats if you can do that. We'll also open it up for casual discussion too, so that we're not just hiding behind PowerPoints. And just wanted to offer Jamie and Behan the microphone right now.
Hi, thank you so much, Ellen. It's really fun to get to join. Thank you for inviting us to your winter series. What a great way to like brighten up darker, colder days when by thinking about, oh, I don't know, places like this and being aboard a boat somewhere nice and warm. So this is actually out in the Marshall Islands. This is from a little over a year ago. But the super quick background on us is that we each come to sailing in very different ways. Mine involves, cute sailor outfits and 80s hair, and Jamie's involved big, fancy, fast boats. But basically, being on boats has been part of our story literally from the day we met on a J35 in Long Island Sound. And having our kids aboard from the time they were born, not living aboard yet. We didn't live aboard with them until they were 4, 6, and 9 when we moved aboard. But then we sailed around the world with them, and they turned into big, hairy teenagers, and grew up tracing this red line around the world with us.
And now they're all 20
And
somethings.
now they're all 20 somethings, and they're back on land, and we're empty nesters, but still doing the thing. This is Jamie and I last year as we came through Micronesia. Living on a boat has been the best life we can imagine. And, even if we were back stateside instead of where today, actually, we're here in Okinawa, Japan. Even if we were back stateside, I can't imagine where I want to live except on a boat on the water. And whether or not that view changed every few days or was the same one from a live aboard slip, I hope we can do this. I hope we have the ability to do this for a really long time. Which actually gets to the first thing we wanted to talk about, which is the three-legged stool. So the three-legged stool, this is like, I guess, the foundation of how we think about cruising and living aboard. And the three-legged stool is super important.
All the legs have to be there, or the stool
Yeah,
doesn't stand.
yeah.
And the three legs, with regards to living aboard or cruising, are everybody has to want to be there.
Key,
Whether
right? Like,
whether it's a couple, if you're single-handed, awesome,
cool,
that's
that's a lot
easy.
simpler.
But if it's a couple, and it's one person's dream, the partner has to buy into it enough. And I think a good message here is, because it often is one person's dream and the other person is going along, that cruising isn't, and living aboard isn't just about a sailboat. It is about so much more than that. So if you're if you're a partner that's not quite as into it, find the things that you can get out of it
Mhm.
that are rewarding for you, whether it's travel or swimming with dolphins in the Caribbean or the million other things that it can be.
Mhm. It's true, right? Like you have to have a reason to want to be there. And we joke that we have a therapy and a marriage counselor hat that we sometimes wear with the folks we work with. And of course, we do not have that training. Um, but it's kind of true in terms of helping folks communicate about what's their reason for being there. And like I like sailing well enough, and over time I've grown to love passage making. Like I can't wait to have our next bigger passage. But for me, the love of this active cruising life is more about learning what makes a place tick, what's culturally different, what new food do they have, what words can I learn in a different language. And it's about the bite-sized living we get to have on a boat where when we pre-cruising had kind of the American dream of the suburban McMansion and the manicured yard and the good school district and all of that. I don't know. I don't ever want that again. I really like living in this little footprint. So we've got that one leg nailed, and the other two are a little simpler. One is money, and one is health. We see a lot of folks that want to live on a boat, and they don't end up doing it until rather later in life, and then they have self-limited in their physical ability to live on a boat. Not gonna lie, I mean it's demanding. There are days that we hurt. I'm glad we started when I was in my 30s. And I feel like it has helped us retain health in some ways because of the constant bits of activity we have.
The reason we went cruising when we did with young kids, because that was an unusual choice. We always thought it would be after we were retired, but my mother was 56 and died from cancer. And it was a message to us in her younger age that there is no guarantee. And she was just about to retire and start to, enjoy a different slice of life, and was gone in a matter of a couple of months.
Yeah.
And so that no guarantee reality, we have a coaching client couple that we work with that put an order in on a new boat, very active international. They had just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He dropped dead like a month later. So there are no guarantees. So if you want to do this thing, make a plan, set a date, and do it.
Your life is better on the water,
The
almost certainly. We're here to say.
Yeah, the health
It's a
thing
little biased,
is
but-
real. And then
yeah.
the money part of it is not that you need to be in a super yacht. It's just that you need to have an adequate amount and then set expectations to live to the money that you have with respect to the boat that you buy, the effort that you're going to have to put into it to maintain it, and the money that you have to support your your living, whether it's at a dock or whether you're actively cruising, whether
You have to be able to afford the boat that you've got,
yeah,
which is more than just buying the boat.
and the lifestyle. It's easy. We've seen people that are on a rice and beans budget, and they get
We'll talk more
and-
about financial implications.
yeah, and they
in a
get caught
bit.
up with friends who are
Yeah.
going out every day, and then all of a sudden they've exceeded their budget.
Yeah. But maybe for folks that are thinking about this, if you want to just put into the chat, how many stool legs do you have today? 1, 2, or 3? And if you've got 3 and you're not living on a boat, talk to me. Actually, talk to Ellen. Yeah, I am curious, like as folks look, or maybe you don't know yet, and you're trying to figure that out. In which case, definitely as we go through here, feel free to pop questions into the chat. One of the nice things about having a co-presenter is that we're not both talking at the same time, and we can kind of keep an eye on questions. Plus, Ellen's here to help with that too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the right boat. This is a rather important thing because it turns out YouTube doesn't necessarily paint a realistic picture of what living aboard and cruising and sailing is like, and maybe some of these images on the screen now represent other realities, the less glamorous side of cruising and living aboard. But the right boat starts with, we strongly feel, ditching the dogma that is often around selecting a boat to do these things. And we started I'm from Connecticut, Behan's from San Francisco, but we started in Puget
It's a
Sound.
country.
And in Puget Sound in the Pacific Northwest, often if you're thinking about cruising, everybody's like, it's got to be a Bob Perry design boat, and it's got to have, it's got to be pointy at both ends, and it's got to have all these features. Oh, it has to be a cutter rig. These things aren't true, and there's nothing wrong with those boats. That's not the point. The point is that there can be a far broader spectrum of boats that are totally appropriate. So as we got cruising, we were in Mexico for a while, and then we started across the South Pacific. And the more we got out there, we more saw boats of all kinds that were showing up as in the same anchorage that we were, with our more sort of traditionally imaged blue water cruising boat. And we're in Saguaro in the Cook Islands, and an X Yachts 42, fin keel, spade rudder, performancy, sails well in light air, sailed into the anchorage, and we sort of joked they must be lost. They missed the exit ramp or something, and
Very, very kind of slick, racy looking boat,
yeah,
and we are literally in the middle of the Pacific here. Like if you took Google Earth, and you put Saguaro in the middle, it's basically blue, more or less to the perimeter.
yeah,
I gotta,
and
I gotta put a cover on this hatch. Excuse me, the sun is chasing us.
and I went over and I talked to them. I was curious of their story, and they were like, I said, where have you been? And they said, we just spent the last 2 years cruising in Patagonia. And and that reality was the last time we ever judged the boat's capability by the boat's features. And it's more about your skill set. What are you capable of doing with the boat? And we told this story at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival maybe 10 years ago, and this ginormous Dutch guy walked up and he said, "You know your story about that boat in Patagonia?"
I'm ready to jump in and defend Jamie a little bit because
I
I mean
thought,
it's the Wooden Boat Festival. It's like the graybeard, pipe smoking, salty dog convention.
yeah, and I thought he was going to tell me how wrong I
No
was.
offense to anyone with a graybeard.
And he said, "You're absolutely right. We spent 7 years in the bottom of South America and Antarctica on a Beneteau First 42, which is a similar performance version Beneteau." And so, yes, you can
We would
buy,
never have dreamed of going cruising on a boat like that at
yeah,
at the outset.
and there can be bad Beneteaus that have had damage that makes them a bad cruising boat. But the point is, there can be good ones. We're not here selling Beneteaus, but all the point is just to broaden out. If you're thinking about buying a boat and you're shopping, what can you look at buying? Because one of the faults that people get into is they buy a really old boat, and old boats turns out have old boat problems. It's everything in the boat has a lifespan. And so
Our boat's 44 years old, for
we can
context.
tell you about the things that you end up replacing on an old boat at some point sooner or later. Literally everything on the boat has a lifespan. So you think a rudder is a forever item on a boat? It's not. The stainless steel post on a rudder over time can degrade from different corrosions, and replacing rudders a thing. Hatches, ports, through hulls, engines. We replaced our engine 3 years ago. We're on our third water maker. We've replaced our rigging 3 times. Like everything is a lifespan. So older boats tend to have things come up to their end of their life, and they become more project boat than people imagined. So the right boat is the one where you're not stuck in the boatyard for 5 years getting ready to go on an adventure. It's about getting out there.
Yeah. And
But
also, as a
I'd
nod
like to
to our host here, it's to expand the range of boats that are in your consideration set. I feel like we want people to get on boats because we just think it's an amazing life. And if you have unnecessarily narrowed your consideration set based upon dogma that's actually not really valid, that's maybe going to keep you out of a boat.
Yeah, and I see a comment. So it's more about the expertise of the captain, crew than the boat. We believe that is the case, but we don't start as experts. We start out as um, not experienced or even naive and ignorant. Like when we started, I could sail. I used to race professionally, and I had lots. I was a sail designer and all those
I was
things.
like self-taught in a sunfish, so completely different than Jamie's
But
experience.
yeah, but I didn't know anything about diesel engines. I didn't know how to fix an outboard. These things came with time, and so the path to getting out there further is not getting mired in the boat selection. It's tiptoeing forward and making good choices so that you're not like you know, sailing out to Block Island in a gale, and you make good choices, and you'll slowly broaden your experience and your footprint level, and then you'll have a day when the engine overheats and you need to park it and then figure out what are those causes, and that's how you slowly develop your skill, and jump into learning opportunities when they come. If there's classes that you can take, or a knowledgeable cruiser down the dock, talk to them.
Yeah. I put this slide up just as a guide in a way to something else that we think is really important in the context of what's the right boat. And that's your budget. And we sort of tipped on that or into that a little bit earlier, talking about, the right boat kind of being the one you can afford. but to be thoughtful with your budget, and especially to do your due diligence with regard to what kind of work does that boat need for it to serve the purpose you have in mind, and can you handle that? Because it can be really easy. Jamie talked about old boat problems. Wow, let's see. In the last few years, we've repowered. Well, that wasn't cheap. um, of course, the re-rigging, that wasn't either, but a whole host of things. And you creep into some significant expenses that can be easy to overlook when you're buying a boat too much with your heart and not enough with your head. And the failure to launch that we see, I think, has a lot to do with people buying the boat that was not a financial good fit for them.
Yeah, well, often there's a misalignment here with people spending most of their money on the boat and not recognizing that there's more to refitting costs than they expect. They can have a nice survey and all of that. Surveyor, even the best surveyors, they're only on the boat for a day or some hours or a day and a half, and they still can't see everything. A good surveyor will catch a lot and important things, but you move on the boat, and a week later, then something fails, something goes. Until you're using your boat is unreliable until proven otherwise. And so those refit costs do stack up, and they can eat into that cruising kitty that you're hoping to sail away with to support your better than rice and beans budget.
One hopes. But it's also, so I'd really pick this picture to go with talking about gear, but it fits very well here too in terms of, what's the right boat. And I guess a segue, which is that this is us on the left, and these are our buddy boats in the South Pacific. So this is a bunch of years ago now, but we're a semi-performance, 47-foot, 70s design, 80s build on the left, and on the far right, it's a Baba 30. And we had the kind of baseline of cruising conveniences in a sense that, we're generating our own power. We've got, we have things the Baba 30 didn't have, like refrigeration. They were going really more bare bones to get out there. And then, of course, our friends in the middle on the multi-million-dollar Nordhaven, they didn't have the same budget issues that either of us had. And it didn't matter at all. We each had the boats that suited our budgets to be able to let us get out there and enjoy life on a boat.
The same sunset.
Same sunset. And we had the best time hanging out and sharing anchorages all across the South Pacific. So this really ties also into what kind of gear do you need? Because there's a little bit of a how long is a piece of string question there, as with what's the boat budget that you should have to buy a boat. Because it is not something you can just define. And there's any dogmatic answers around that are not going to be the right answer.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. Is there a percentage estimate of the purchase price that the refit will pile up to be? And the simple answer is no. Unfortunately, there's not, because every boat is so different. And so the key here is doing really good due diligence before you own the boat. And we have a spreadsheet that's a calculator for this that breaks the elephant, the boat, down into its component parts to be able to estimate what those refit costs might be. So there's anchor gear, sails and canvas, there's rigging, there's energy systems, electrical systems, dinghy and outboard, all of these different categories. And literally, when we're working with people, I will look at the listing and I'll pick it apart. I write a little report for the people we're working with, and then have them fill in the calculator based on that. And it's like, look at the pictures. Anchor chain is not just surface rust. It's like you can tell there's chunks of metal coming off. Well, a new anchor chain on a cruising boat that wants to go lots of places might be $1,500 to $2,500. You get 10 or 15 $2,000 investments, and all of a sudden that refit is getting really expensive. A life raft recertification, $600 to $1,500.
And then you do need the rounding up fudge factor, and we have people put in essentially a slush fund in addition, because there's always the stuff that you don't know, and anyone who's taken a boat into a shipyard knows the amount of time and the amount of money you think you're going to spend inevitably goes up by the
Yeah.
time you get out.
And then there's a layer to the refit, which is, are you DIY or the credit card captain? And there's a huge difference in what those costs will be depending on which category you land in. And the easiest way to save money in a refit is to learn to be DIY. So if you're not super mechanical to begin with, if you're willing to learn and have guidance with that, there's some YouTube is very helpful for this, some of it's not, but that you can DIY things more than you imagine. Like, again, I didn't know anything about outboard maintenance and diesel maintenance and installing a water maker, but I'd sat there and I read and I scratched my head and I pulled out Nigel Calder's book and I found my way through it. And over a lot of years now of doing this, you can become quite handy in a boatyard, it turns out.
We had a 5-year plan to go cruising, and that was the term over which we were trying to save money and get ready to go. And the beginning of that really was within weeks of losing Jamie's mother, and realizing that this thing that Jamie and I talked about doing someday, we really should not do in the amorphous unknown future, but we should like make a plan. But ages of kids and finances and things were like 5 years. But spending that time putting that plan together also gave us a chance to think about how to line our lives up financially so that we could make it happen. And I know we definitely get folks coming to us now who are like, I want to go yesterday, but they also want like the big shiny boat. and and there's like some realignment that has to happen. You can go really in short notice, but you have to be able to handle the boat that you can hopefully also afford. And we feel like oftentimes people need a bit of a reset on that. A
Yeah.
couple of aphorisms. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
I can't find my raise hand button. I don't know why. I wanted to just jump in and say, for people who are looking to move aboard from what you're saying, the purchase of the boat is almost incidental to the ongoing kind of expectations you should have about being able to upkeep that home, that floating home over time. It's going to need standing rigging. It's going to need, a new water maker. It's going to need maybe new anchor road. So figuring that into your plan, like what's your future income and can it support that?
Mhm.
Uh, it seems like those are the questions. I think some people may be under the misconception that they could just buy a boat, move aboard and save all this money, on
Yeah.
housing or whatever. And maybe it's a cheaper lifestyle, quote unquote, but in fact, it's like owning a home, right?
Hmm.
You have to stay on top of it.
It's true, you absolutely do, and even it's a tougher environment than a home is. Homes don't run down the block and vibration and water thrown at it and all the things that happen on a boat that cause degradation and have the sun eating the sails and all these
Hmm.
things. And so it's two elements here. One really is before you're committed to owning the boat, really look at the listing, the details. Just because it has solar doesn't mean it's a good amount of solar. Just because it has the a nice brand of anchor doesn't mean it's the right size anchor for the boat. You have to look at these things because too often people only find out after they own the boat that the stuff wasn't quite right and then they have to replace it, meaning they're buying it twice. They bought it when they bought the boat, they're finding it's not good. Now I have to go out and buy more solar panels to get the power that I need.
And a lot of those things are things that hopefully are found by a surveyor if it's something that's not right. And then you don't, in theory, have to buy it twice. You get to have that post-survey negotiation before you close. And that is a really important opportunity. But there are a lot of surveyors that are kind of ticking boxes more than being investigative.
Yeah,
And that's what you need.
and one clarification, surveyors are hopefully good surveyors are finding fault with things. They're not
They're not
necessarily,
magicians.
well, but they're also not rating things based on the context of
Mm,
what you want to do with it. So there's a lesser burden for equipment and condition of the boat for somebody who's living at a dock than there is for somebody who's going to cross an ocean. So there's some context there that's pretty important.
mhm.
But the surveyor's not going to say, yeah, that's not enough solar to meet your power needs when you're off grid and nowhere near a shore power cord. So
Which gets to something I want to mention actually is, I was trying to come up with some takeaways for folks today, regardless of whether you want to go sail around the world, or, hang out in a beautiful cove in Narragansett Bay. And it's that finding that balance between, outfitting your boat with all of the things and maybe never quite getting all the things because you're always trying to do them or pay for them. And so you don't quite realize the dream for that reason, or being so minimalist that you or your partner are just not happy. And but that was that was more of your budget levels, like finding that magic line. And part of it is defining something. Man, the sun is really chasing me today. Defining what we would say is your camping line. Like, if you know where your camping line is, that can be really helpful. It's that hatch. That can be incredibly helpful. If you know what if your camping line, like I'm thinking of a couple that started working with us recently, and they lived in a camper van. They did van life for a few years, and so because of that, we know their camping line is really different than people who come, as we did, from a very comfortable home with easy conveniences that help make life for a busy family easier. That works. That's good enough. Thanks, honey. And knowing where your camping line is lets you get a sense of what do you actually need on the boat that you're going to live on.
Yeah, we can all
Because
camp.
you can all
we can all
camp
camp
for a little
week.
while. Yeah, but you can't camp for a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Usually. Yeah.
We have a question. We have a question from Ethan. Do you have an estimated percentage of purchase price for refit costs that you've generally seen close?
Yeah, I
Generally,
think Jamie. Yeah, I'm curious if you have a thought on that. I think Jamie tried to address that earlier. That you just can't. You really have to do due diligence, and every boat is different. That assigning a rule of thumb is a false sense of security.
And the mistake that we see is that people will say 10%. I just need 10% more as the refit cost. And more often than not, it can be quite a bit more than that. And everybody's different, but we've had coaching clients that would buy a nice 40-foot cruising boat, decently equipped, and then these images of what do I need to be safe, what do I need to be comfortable, and all of a sudden they literally have doubled their investment. They buy it for 120 and they spend $120,000 more to put in lithium batteries and big water maker and a new dinghy and all the things.
But they bought the boat that
Was ready to go.
ready to go, and was the type that was pitched to them as the best kind of boat for the thing they wanted to do, when actually it had all sorts of things and all sorts of investments they had to put into it. And they have literally, I'm thinking of a specific family we're working with, they have basically bought this boat twice now.
And there's also a common thing where people they're still working and they have income, and so they're like, while I have my income, I'm just going to upgrade the thing to the next level because it'll be great later on. And what they don't fully appreciate is that when they're not working, the value of $10 or $100 changes significantly. And so you go cruising and 6 months later and something is broken, or your horseshoe buoy blew off the back of the boat in a squall one night, or whatever those things are. And then it's not so easy because you spent so much money up front and you're not with income now, and replacing or fixing or repairing these things feels a lot more painful when that income stream is gone.
Yeah, it does. And we fell into that trap of, before we went cruising, and our boat had things that we wanted to do to it. Our boat, which had probably circumnavigated and with the prior owner definitely done like a multi-year loop around the Pacific, and was sold as ready to go. And in theory, could have done a lot of things, but we were putting in tens of thousands of dollars into Totem to get it ready to go in 2007.
And the day before we were sailing out of Puget Sound, our autopilot failed. And I said,
no problem.
No
We have
problem.
spares. They came with the boat.
One of the features of the boat would have spares for like everything. And I thought, great. So I went out and I went to the bag of spares and I pulled out, one component after another. And they had been spares too long and they all failed. And it turned out that autopilot company was Navman, which was a Kiwi company, had gone out of business. So all of a sudden, the day before we were going cruising, it wasn't just replacing a rudder angle indicator, an electronic compass. We had to buy a brand new entire autopilot system, minus the drive unit that still worked. So there's like $3,000 we didn't count on spending. And then I had to figure out how to install an autopilot, which I hadn't done before, and kind of pushed it in the moment. Because I could figure out, we saved the another $1,000 to $2,000 that an installer would have charged us to do that. as a real example of this.
Yeah. And so that picture that I had up earlier of maintaining your boat is sort of multifaceted. We talk about it as becoming the engineer, and the burden for that is lower if you're at that dock in Narragansett Bay somewhere, right? Because you have access within decent range to skilled services and people you can pay to come and do the things for you. But the reality is that even if you are in that situation where you have access, not understanding and knowing your systems can get you into trouble and cost you a lot because you'll make bad choices. And I'm thinking about how people manage their battery banks, for example, as one. So becoming that engineer is partly to be able to keep up and manage your costs, but becoming the engineer is partly about knowing your boat well enough that you can respond in a situation of urgency.
Yeah, it's easy to prepare a boat to go down to the Bahamas and back, or down to the Caribbean, or going further, and you hired the professionals to do the things to make it so it was going to be reliable, and not be engaged in learning about those things. But when you sail out of the harbor, you're the rigger, you're the sailmaker, and you're the diesel mechanic, and all the other things. If you have problems, it's on you to figure it out because they're not on your boat anymore.
Yeah.
So really getting engaged in it is a mechanical life. It's a hands-on life, and the more you can find opportunities to learn about equipment and gear and skills that are necessary, it'll serve you down the road.
Yeah. There's a couple of really great questions in the chat, and I'll take them in order here. First, hi Joe. Since you've been doing this so many years, do you have an idea of your yearly budget? I know what ours is, but I don't know what yours is, or Monique's is, or Lori's, or Monica's, or Rob's. There are so many different budgets that are out there, and I think it's really tempting to try to assign a figure and say that's what I could go cruising on, and that's going to be that's what I need by knowing what other people use. And I know real numbers help, and I promise in a moment after I get off my like little soapbox here, I will give you real numbers. But I think it's super important to actually, again, just like the due diligence for buying a boat, to really think about how to lay out a budget of all the different categories to spend. And I say it that way because that's how we try to work with people on figuring out what their realistic budget is. Lay out all of our categories to spend. We know what we spend in them. What are the categories that we didn't even have? Like, we were too broke to ever fly back home and visit family, which was kind of hard sometimes.
It was
But
5 plane tickets.
yeah, 5 plane tickets, and then the plane tickets are just the beginning, right? Need to be able to pay for a place to keep the boat safely and probably someone to watch the boat. I mean, we can't just like fly away and leave it at anchor somewhere. So yeah, flying home for many years was just not an option until we were back in the continent. Was the first time that we actually got on a flight again, like 10 years after we left.
For general numbers, though, for guidance, our long-term monthly average spend when the kids were aboard was about $3,500
Yeah.
per month.
Yeah.
And what that
And that's
got,
everything, right?
yeah, that's health insurance and boat insurance and boat maintenance and groceries and everything.
But you have to put us into the rice and beans category for a bit of that too, because we didn't sell our house, which we had planned to do to fund cruising because the real estate market crashed in 2008. So we were basically living off of savings and trying to spend as little as possible so that we could keep going because it was just so awesome. So we were foregoing a lot of things. We wouldn't really eat on shore. We didn't do the inland trips that other people did. And we were making different choices. We're heavily, heavily DIY on things on board.
Yeah, but it's not the what we were spending, just for context, a little context, wasn't the lowest end of what somebody cruising could
Nope.
go out and manage. We were not fully depriving ourselves of eating well and things. People can get out on a
Tacos in Mexico are a pretty good deal.
yeah, they're cheap, and food in Southeast Asia is excellent and also inexpensive. So we could go out to restaurants there, but um, it's sort of a frugal but not deprived budget is what ours equates to. People can go on less and still have a great time, and certainly people go on lots more budget than that as well. I think commonly people we see now are, I would say, between $4,000 and $5,000 a month is a reasonable number, with the caveat that international boat insurance varies a lot depending on the value of the boat, and that can be a number that pushes that up well beyond that.
Yep. And depending on the age of the boat and other factors. And actually, let's talk about insurance in a minute. I'm going to park that while we go through the other questions from the chat. How much do you cross train? I really like that question. We don't cross train probably as much as we should. We did a lot of cross training in the beginning when we got started, but we definitely fall into our comfortable patterns of we do the things that we're each best at this point. But we also have a baseline. I think cross training. What I assume you mean, Lynn, is like let's say anchoring. Who's at the helm and who's at the bow? And how often do you swap those roles? And in the beginning, we would take turns doing it, and or when you're docking, who's at the helm and who's got a line ready to toss or step off. I don't jump onto the dock with that line, and we cross train probably just enough that I know how to do the things that are a baseline, which is something else I want to talk about, how like minimal skills for partners who are not the super salty ones. Jamie is the super salty one who like grew up on boats and could sail probably, before he could ride a bike. Yeah, right? And that's not me. But you do have to be, as the non-salty partner, you have to know enough to be able to handle things in an emergency situation. And I can confidently say I can do all the things. And actually, even over the years, I've managed to acquire some reasonable mechanical skill, which does not come naturally to me. But I know how to think through a lot of troubleshooting that would have completely flummoxed me in 2008 when we were getting ready to go cruising. But cross training, I think to be intentional about it in the beginning is important for safety to be able to swap roles because it might just be you and you have to be able to do that. But then, we've allowed ourselves to then do what we each do best for straight up efficiency and effectiveness purposes.
Yeah, and oftentimes
Can I
people
jump
do
in?
follow.
Can I,
Sure.
mind if I interrupt? I'm sorry, I don't know why I can't raise my hand, but I just want to reinforce what Behan and Jamie are saying about cross training. And historically, the boat has been the domain of the guy, right? I mean, the guy's in charge, the guy's the one running the boat. That's changing in the world, big time. But there are still dynamics between couples on boats, whether you're cruising around the world or just, out for a day sail, where the dynamic is that, maybe the guy's in charge and the woman is, hanging and doing some hauling of lines. I can't impress upon everyone enough how important it is, particularly for women, to learn how to quote unquote take the helm in an emergency. This is
Mhm.
this is essential. Like if you
Yep.
think about it, anything can happen on a boat, and somebody can get whacked in the head by in a jibe, in a boom, or fall overboard, and you must have the confidence to take on that job. So
100%.
I'm putting aside pitch for not being the one that is just make sure that you know how to take over in a situation. And there are classes about that, and you can find them. Anyway, carry on. I just needed to put that out there.
Yeah, and I just want to add that we often talk with people. This is a common theme,
Mhm.
and
And we
and
have some resources to point to.
yeah, this minimum skill set for the less comfortable, sailing partner is fairly minimum.
Yeah.
The Cruising Club of America put out a thing about this, and we have
Hmm.
a document we put out. You
Hmm.
don't need to know all the things. You need to know just some core fundamental things.
Doesn't have to be pretty.
And it doesn't have to be pretty. Docking the boat, if it was an emergency situation, bang into the dock. Who cares? But
Right.
get the person to the medical help or whatever is needed. The other thing that's really important we've seen is that because it is a very physical environment, managing the boat and fixing the things, that it can feel like the person who's more comfortable with that is taking a bigger share of the work, the burden of being on the boat, and that's really wrong because there's so much other stuff. Being's just not mechanical, and so like
Straight up.
the refit
Good.
and the boat work and all that stuff, that's sort of my world. But
I keep the
there's
mechanical one fed and watered and all that.
well, but there's a million other things that I have value in that she contributes, and so there's
Mhm.
absolutely no sense that I'm doing more work or anything like that. That's how couples get into problems when they're cruising.
To appreciate the different things that we bring to the table. And
Yes.
Jamie's are definitely the more obvious skill sets for cruising. But yeah, thanks, honey. I do.
I
I pull my weight in other ways.
I, 150%.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question about that. So, and it's important also that the person who's not the sailor or less accomplished at that feels like they're heard in the choices and the decisions, even around weather and boating decisions. If that less confident person feels like they're not heard in
It
what
it
you're facing,
it grows resentment, right?
and then they don't contribute. And
Hmm.
as the person with more experience, I want other eyes and ears and a sense of something's not right
Hmm.
all over the boat. So we used to encourage our kids a lot. If you see something or hear something or whatever
Tell
that's
us,
not right,
bring it
tell
up.
us. We want to know. We're encourage them to participate as active crew members.
And they might not technically have had the skills at that point, but they sure had the senses and could tell us things, and on multiple occasions saved our bacon, whether it was not going over a long line because they saw the buoys that we didn't see, or they heard that there was water spraying into the bilge because one of our, pressure water system hose had popped or something like that. Like multiple times were they able to be
Yeah.
materially useful.
Yep.
Ellen, you've got your hand up.
You had a slide, I'm just looking at the clock. You had a slide that you shared with me yesterday. It kind of was a bullet list of stuff considerations, in other words. And I wondered
Oh
if you
yeah.
could do that with
Oh,
the
that
boat.
was that was my outline, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's it, but you're cruising through your topics. I just wanted to give people a visual on these different.
Sure. Let me pull that up a second here. Bear with me. I'm gonna just jump into where I was here. I thought insurance is definitely something we probably want to talk about. Making the break. Maybe it was this one?
No, it was kind of maybe even earlier. It was just kind of general topics. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yep. Yep, these are all the things we wanted to try to make sure we covered today.
There's a lot of content, far more than the time would allow.
Yeah.
Um,
So you want to jump into the insurance questions?
Sure. Yeah. So I thought insurance is important because whether you are living aboard in the US or have international cruising aspirations, insurance is getting to be a bigger and bigger deal. And I think there's some legacy uh, uh, um, chatter around, well, I'll just self-insure, and as in I won't get insurance. And that's really very difficult and not a good idea to do. And the picture on the left is one reason why. Because if this person was self-insured, do they really have the financial ability to do the environmental mitigation of what they have just created here? I'm not sure that they do. I'm not sure most of us
Yeah.
do,
There, there's
right?
there's also another practical reason, which is that if you're going into a marina or a boatyard, they require that you have insurance.
And that's the other picture I have to kind of help us remember that, which is, and it's so true. And it used to be maybe you did, but they didn't really check so much, or maybe you only needed liability. But there is a trend in the US that goes right along with the corporate trend of marinas getting bought up, that they are uh, more and more strict about actually requiring comprehensive hull insurance, not just liability, and and even sometimes enforcing minimum boat ages. So knowing how insurable your boat is and anticipating the cost of insurance really needs to be part of scoping out your whole plan for life on a boat.
Yeah, we've even been to some countries that have minimum liability insurance requirements, like Australia. It was like $5 million or
Yep, to
something.
going to the marinas, and it was totally absurd. I think we finally got a rider that allowed us to go into some marinas. But you can get you they'll just say sorry, you're
Yeah.
not welcome if you don't
So
have this insurance, and you have to show that piece of
the
paper.
the next
Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, so as brokers, when we kind of scope out our potential buyers for boats, we ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions is, what is your plan for insurance? Who are you talking to? Are you aware that sometimes it's harder to insure older boats? Sometimes there are some issues with living aboard or leaving for an across passage across an ocean. So the earlier you can get that information in your plan, the better off you are. You don't want to be making that decision as you're casting your lines off and heading off to Polynesia, So find out soon enough, as soon as you can, about the insurance because, I mean, yeah, the boat landing on the rocks is one thing, but if your
Mhm.
diesel engine spills in the harbor, you are in trouble. I mean, that's a huge financial issue. So,
Massive,
Yeah.
massive, yeah. And there's a related question in the chat here. Have we had issues with insurance given the age of our boat? Absolutely. 44-year-old boat is a lot harder to insure. It is easier for domestic policy, although domestic policies, State Farm, Progressive, things like that, can have other constraints, like many of them are not liveaboard friendly. So you've got to know that you can get insurance by having an agent you can talk to about a given boat and your intentions before you even commit to that boat.
Yeah, I think it's just important to segment this a little bit in that when you're looking at boat insurance, if you're in the US or even out into the northern half of the Bahamas, you can be just fine with a US domestic policy, given the nuances with whether they allow liveaboards or not, and those are things to work through. The benefit to a US domestic policy is they're far less expensive and burdensome on the policy requirements. When you're going to start to go international, for the Bahamas, the line is usually around Georgetown, but if you're going to the Caribbean or Mexico or the South Pacific, international policies, there are three gotchas.
The age of the boat,
Yeah,
the value of the boat, and the experience of the operators, the insured. And by experience, it's not like, do you have your captain's license? It's what's your experience of ownership and claims for a boat like the one you want to insure right now?
similar sized boat. If you sailed a Flying Junior in college, that's not relevant experience, and they really don't care about ASA classes and things. Those can be good for other reasons, but they're not going to help with insurance. So
And,
a lot
and
of
comment in the chat, Progressive has denied us because we're now in North Carolina and we're over 35 feet. Yeah, Progressive's getting harder and harder, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that stinks.
So with the age of the boat, generally for international, over 20 years old gets more difficult.
And we have one of our clients is an insurance agent, actually, and he said now even over 10 years is starting to mean basically the A-rated underwriters, the underwriters you want with better policies, are very much less interested in writing you a policy.
Yep. And the value of the boat below 150 to $200,000 is where, once again, it's more difficult to do that. And the reason is because you have a 45-foot older cruising boat valued at $150,000. You get a lightning strike, it's $50,000 minimum. And whether that policy you paid $2,000 for the premium, or you have a $600,000 catamaran and you paid $25,000 for the premium, the insurance strike damage cost is the same, more or less. But the premium they make is a far better for the big catamaran. So higher value is easier to get insurance for.
This kind of gets to your question, Monica. Is there any truth to the axiom about stepping up in boat size reinsurance, and why I asked that the way I did? Because actually, if the boat you're stepping up to actually isn't worth any more, it's not going to be any more attractive. So if you were getting, I don't know, an old Kraut catamaran that's value is similar to your current monohull, that's not going to help you. That's, if anything, going to hurt you. And it is really that incentive to try to get the commission of an agent that seems to make the costlier boats more appealing. But even so, if they fall into but it's an older boat situation, it's not necessarily going to be easier. And again, we're talking about international insurance for people who go cruising. It's sort of a different set of constraints for people that are looking for domestic policies, US only policies.
And without experience, if you're buying a boat and trying to get an international policy, the workaround is an insurance company will often require you to hire a captain for about 50 hours.
Yep.
To be on the boat with you, then to sign off that you're competent handling the boat.
So Monica, that's my expectation for you. Like, you may actually, your chartering cat experience doesn't mean anything to the underwriters. We do help folks put resumes together which are intended to make them appealing to underwriters, make them look like the low risk bet, because it's all gambling with insurance, right? So trying to make you look really safe, and your engineering background and your charting experience contribute to that. But mostly the bigger hurdle is we've never owned a boat like this before, actually. And so we're still considering you like a little green.
But other elements of life can be helpful for this. If you're a pilot and you required to be licensed and take safety seriously, that does actually play in favor. So the resume being mentioned that we have people often do, very short, but anything in your life that shows that you're a safe, low risk
You are
bet for
marketing
insurance,
yourself to
yeah,
the
you sell
underwriter.
yourself to the underwriter. And normally, our message isn't that getting insurance internationally is impossible if you have an older boat. You'll get insurance. It's just likely to be at some point that it's not an A grade underwriter. It's
Yep.
a lower rated underwriter that may be slower to pay out or
So
have different outcomes.
using us as an example, 44-year-old boat, we actually really struggle to get good insurance, despite the fact that we have a little bit of experience and zero claims. Our boat is 44 years old. Our boat is worth less than $150,000. That was the other thing, Jason, that agent mentioned is the line now is really more closer to 200,000, where it gets a lot easier for you to get better underwriters. So we cannot access A-rated underwriters, and we have to really know every word of the fine print in that policy. And can I tell you how painful it is to read like 39 pages of insuranceese and try to understand it? It's painful. But we have to know, for example, that it has gotchas like every one of the fire extinguishers on our boat has to have been certified within the last year, because if it hasn't been and we had a claim, our claim, even if it's completely unrelated to the fire extinguishers, could be denied. So these policies that we have access to are much less favorable than the ones that a boat that was newer and costlier would offer.
Can you
It's
touch on the topic of, can we switch over a little bit to the topic
Yeah,
of health insurance? And
yeah.
um, sometimes people who are heading out on these adventures, they're older, they're maybe accustomed to US insurance access. How do you handle insurance for yourselves?
Yeah, so we've done different things over time depending on how broke we were. And we have been really, really broke at times. And sometimes we've been broke enough in a way that we fit into what's been by far the best healthcare access that we could have for a safety net, which is an ACA policy through our home state. And that home state allowed, because of our low income, we were able to get subsidized health insurance that we would never necessarily use because we really have to be back in Washington State, but it would be there for us if we had a catastrophic need. And we saw that play out in person when one of our cruising friends, similar situation in terms of like lower income, had an ACA policy back in Washington, was back visiting family, had a little cough, went in, oh, stage 4 lung cancer, 40 something years old, non-smoker, marathon runner, but was able to get amazing care and actually beat cancer or forestalled significantly, and got to watch her kids grow up more because she had that ACA policy, which was the I guess for
Was that,
U.S. nationals the
was
best
that,
thing to do.
was that an international incident where they were covered overseas for something?
No, so you'd have to be so here it's going to vary by the insurance, but ACA policies will be the affordable gateway into the insurance policies then you can access in your state. And then it's what's the policy and what does it allow you to do internationally. Most of that is only going to be stuff that's paid out if you're back, so you have to get back. So then the international insurance you might want is what's the one that gets me home, which is what, like, for example, maybe vets who have TRICARE, or access, military retirees who have access to VA services, but they're really limited in what they can get internationally. The insurance they might want would be cover me for the catastrophic event when it starts, but then cover me to get home so that I can get the rest of it paid for
and
at
this
home.
is this is called travel insurance,
Yeah.
where you're outside of the U.S. for most of the year. They have different limits on some. Maybe they give you 2 weeks in the U.S. Some could be longer than that. Travel insurance policies are relatively low cost, high deductible. Our family of five was often $1,500 to $2,500 for a year, and it would have $1 million of coverage. So it's that catastrophic policy. I think deductibles usually were in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. So you need your little, bag of money buried under in the tree in the backyard to be able to pull from that if you ever had a bigger claim. But mostly when we're overseas, there is good medical care and it's very inexpensive.
Or relatively exceptionally affordable. We'll give you a few examples. But another thing I want to say before I forget, which is that you do want to have access to cash to pay for your care. on the hope that it gets reimbursed later. But for example, in Mexico, in other countries where there is nationalized healthcare for their citizens and where there is tourists, you may have to pay cash upfront for your care. And we know firsthand from folks who needed actually heart surgery in Mexico, they had to hand over their credit cards in order for him to get life-saving care that he needed out of the gate. Now, they had an insurance policy that meant that could be addressed later, but they had to have cash up front for the hospital.
There was a cruiser in Indonesia who we later got to meet, a younger guy. He was riding a motorcycle and he was found in a ditch, unconscious, um, and they couldn't find out who he was because he didn't have any ID. And through this roundabout way, the hospital found us and asked if we knew him, and we found out how to ID him. And they got in touch with his family because they were not going to do any care until they knew somebody could pay the bill. Once they connected to his family and they said, "Yep, here's the credit card," he had a fractured skull. They did surgery. They saved his life. He went on to complete a circumnavigation.
We
Great
met
guy.
him. We got to meet him in person, then again in person finally in South Africa, and then in St. Helena.
Yeah.
And
But
anyway,
but
yeah.
that's an example of these countries that can have excellent medical care won't do anything unless somebody's there to pay the bill.
Now, I want to back up a little bit because I feel like we gave some cautionary tales, but actually, if you're leaving the US, congratulations, you're about to have access to way better, way cheaper healthcare than anything you've experienced to date. I am so grateful to get most of our healthcare, frankly, outside of the US. And my goal when I look for travel insurance for us is not to be repatriated, it's to have the care covered where I am because 201, every single country we've been in does it better than we do.
Not every country. Papua
Okay,
New
that's true.
Guinea and
That's true.
Madagascar, no.
If it's a place where you want to get sick, there's also and there's some islands in the Caribbean where I would not want to get sick. Like if you're in Dominica, you just get yourself to Martinique. It's the next island over. They've got French physicians. They've got all the equipment. But you can know these things and anticipate to some extent. Example of actually Jamie, well, both of us, we're kind of pasty white people and we live in the sun and we do our best, but we do have skin cancer stuff that crops up. Jamie for a Mohs surgery, he's had two of them now, but one in Puerto Rico and one in the Philippines, cost somewhere in the order of
Well, the one in the Philippines last year was
85% less than it would have in the States, perhaps,
yeah,
for excellent care.
to fly from Japan to the Philippines, have a chunk of skin cancer cut out, and then fly back and stay in a hotel. It was like $2,000. And in the States, just the surgery itself would have cost at least 10 times that much. So, and this was a doctor, a woman that
She went to Harvard.
She went to Harvard. So she wasn't.
She's had a Mohs clinic in the Philippines for 25 years. She knows what she's doing. Yeah, we've had amazing care. Yeah.
I'd like to zoom in a little bit. We've kind of had a big zoom out conversation for a little bit about, the big wide world. What about somebody who's looking to move on to their boat? Maybe they don't have big aspirations to go offshore and go across the Atlantic. Maybe they're looking for a boat as a housing solution, which is, as we know, a huge crisis right now. I have one buyer who's actually looking for a boat to live on because he can't afford an apartment. I mean, it's crazy. So tell me a little bit about how does this scale down to those folks who are looking maybe at mainly being in a marina for the first year or two and few day sales weekends. How does this whole live aboard transition look for those folks?
I think start with obviously you need to identify your budget, and the budget is going to be less about adding equipment that's unnecessary for a liveaboard. You don't need a life raft, and you don't need a big dinghy and all those sorts of things. So,
And if you're parked at the dock and that rigging is, already 15 years old, and you wouldn't actually want to take it out and get caught in a squall, but you're fine sitting at the dock. You can
yeah,
postpone a lot of those big ticket items that are a really big deal. You might have to have an engine in good working order because that might be required for you in the slip that you're in so that you don't become a derelict boat.
but with that context, I think focus on a boat that's going to be comfortable. If this is home, it doesn't need to be a 40-year-old boat with marble countertops.
Have
It
good
can be,
spaces and have one that you like. Like, do you maybe it does have the marble countertop? It doesn't have the big spaces, but like maybe the traditional style of a Hans Christian is what makes your heart sing. So great, do that. Or maybe it's the bigger spaces of a hunter. There's like a boat for every vibe, just about, depending on what you want and what fits your budget.
yeah, go for value and comfort and try to stay away from a boat that has lots of equipment that is unnecessary for your needs that may require maintenance to keep it up.
Yeah, and maintenance is the real catch, right? Because I feel like if a boat is being used as a cheap housing solution, you still need to have the ability to anticipate a significant um, uh, maintenance need, whether it's your battery bank, whether it's wiring, whether, you can't just barely get in with the budget you have and be okay. That is a recipe for a derelict boat.
Yeah. I think generally we would advise that a newer boat is probably going to be somewhat cleaner
Hmm.
and easier on all fronts for a person to turn it into a liveaboard space, especially if they don't have lots of hands-on background and not
Hmm.
going to be able to take an older boat that was bigger, but they could afford it, but it needs to be rewired because it's a mess, or it needs all the through hulls replaced and the plumbing upgraded. That's becoming a more technical job. A boat that was newer and smaller, especially with the idea that more contemporary boat designs have generally wider beams and wider back ends, so there's more volume for a given length of boat than it comes off at first glance. So a 35-foot, Jeanneau or Catalina or Hunter is going to be as roomy as an older 40-foot boat is.
Okay. It's about 10, almost 10 after 8. I'd like, is it okay if we open things up to questions right now?
Please. Yes,
You all right?
yes.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions? We've seen some in the chats. There are no stupid questions, so you're among friends. If you have any questions at all or thoughts or anything, please, now's the time. These folks are excellent and can answer just about any question. Um, I have one. Okay.
Yes. Come ahead, Ellen.
So I said I'll start it off here. So the boat that someone may initially buy thinking they want to move aboard and sail away, um, may or may not be the boat. It may be great for moving aboard and getting familiar with the whole logistics of boat ownership and mechanics and maintenance and all the logistics of boat ownership. And then maybe in a few years, that boat maybe isn't the right boat for when you're ready to go across the ocean or what have you. So how common is that where folks start out with an expectation that doesn't quite pan out for what their boat is that they
It,
bought?
it's not that common. It does happen. I think of a family we work with that left North Carolina or Chesapeake Bay on a 2-year sabbatical. They bought a low 40s foot catamaran with their for their kids and them to get down to the Caribbean. And it turned out they really liked it and wanted to go further. And so they stumbled onto a low 40s catamaran that was equipped to go further. That family's now in New Zealand and they're in their 4th year and they would like to keep going, but they're running out of money. And so, like, they're going back to Fiji and
I'm sorry,
having,
just correcting one thing. They started in a monohull out of the Chesapeake.
that's what I
I
said.
thought you said cat.
No,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
no,
he did.
monohull Chesapeake.
You said
Yeah.
catamaran. Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah, and then they switched over to the from the mono to the cat when they were in the Caribbean because they've got 3 kids and the kids were getting bigger.
yep. But now they're going to sail up to Fiji and have their final season and go back.
Mhm.
And that's where this is more common, I think. Um, we do get the question more commonly about should I buy a starter boat? And usually our guidance on that is no, because there's a cost implication to buy a boat, to then sell it and pay for broker fees and the slip and the insurance and the maintenance you put into it is not money that you get back, it's sunk cost. And so if that's going to eat into the budget
Mhm.
for the boat that you do sail away on, then it's usually not worth it.
But
Unless,
if you can swing it, it's great. Like, for example, I think it was really helpful for us to have a starter boat because we talked about how important maintenance is. And we essentially got to learn, well, Jamie mostly. I was too busy, chasing toddlers and breastfeeding, but learn the systems of a cruising boat. We had all this racing experience, but you don't worry about like the solenoid on your propane, you know, bonking out every other year when you're on a racing boat. um,
and a million details, and it's true, there is value in what you can learn on a starter boat, but the cost component for many people is notable enough. Like if we didn't have that starter boat, we would have been less knowledgeable starting on the boat. And we actually thought about going on that boat, but it wasn't scalable for our growing kids, so
yeah,
it wasn't going
it
to be
would have
the
been
right solution.
self-limiting. We would have had a 1 to 2 year sabbatical. It would have been great, and then we'd be done because they'd be too big.
Yeah, but
Any
yeah.
further, any other questions? Any other comments? Rob Lonsby is here and he lives aboard his boat, Lucky, right? Rob, Lucky?
Well, the name of the boat is Monil, which
Oh,
is French
Mobile.
for my island. But I'm essentially a coastal cruiser, Maine to the Bahamas.
And
I
you,
mean, I've been to Bermuda and stuff, but I kind of follow the warmth where the temperatures, and then the my domestic policy covers me all the way, like you said, to Georgetown. So and I have a 43-year-old boat. It's covered, and it's reasonable. The medical stuff hasn't come into play. I'm 76 years old, and living on the boat and cruising keeps me fit, keeps me mentally,
Mhm.
sharp, and I wouldn't be where I am if I wasn't cruising.
yeah. And a lot of people do that. There are a lot of people who go aboard their boat and they kind of hug the coast and they go up and down according to the weather. They're in Maine for the summer and then they're making their way south in the fall and they're spending the winter in warmer places. And now Rob is actually on his way back, creeping his way north. So it's not a bad scene, and you don't have to go around the
Sounds
world.
great to me.
Um,
Yeah,
and
sounds awesome.
I would like to poll this group real quick. Rob had the idea of doing a web talk about the ICW and the
Mhm.
logistics of the ICW. Is this the kind of thing that appeals to people? I'm just doing a very random poll here. Is this something that would be of interest to folks on this call?
I
Oh,
bet your folks here today are more self-selected for non-looper types
yeah,
because
yeah,
of
yeah.
us.
Yeah, no, we can always aim for another crowd for this. I think it would be pretty
Yeah,
interesting. So, of course,
I think you'd have a really meaningful
yeah.
audience for that too, and that would be a really great topic.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we'll follow up here with everyone on this call. Thanking you for being here. We'll share a recording. Um, any other information, we'll share the link to uh, Jamie and Behan's PowerPoint. And this isn't to shut down the conversation, just wanted to let you know what's coming because I know some people might need to get off. So,
yeah. We're happy to hang out. I know the day is getting on in the East Coast, but we're happy to hang out.
do you want to hang out a little bit and any other things that we didn't get to that you want to throw in here towards the end?
We could talk all day long.
I
It's
know,
only
I know.
9:15 a.m. in Japan here. It's Thursday morning, so yeah, we've got
We're in the
time.
future. It's good.
How is
But
tomorrow?
yeah,
Tomorrow's lovely. Tomorrow's
although there's
good.
a big thunderstorm just
Yeah.
to the west that's going to hit us in a little while.
Yeah, actually, this reminds me of something that's worth bringing up. So, which is personal safety and how to anticipate your personal safety in different places and in the many ways that can be interpreted. And one of them is weather. And yeah, this morning, so in Japan, because of relative risk for earthquakes and tsunamis, which could be legit devastating, there's actually public broadcast systems coastally all over the country, and we hear it. It effectively is tested, but it plays a little jingle every night at 6 p.m. And this morning there was something on the PA, and uh, our Japanese is not equipped to understand that. But I could go then, and I could look up on uh, our national app here that tells me what's going on locally. What are the risks near us, and it is incredibly helpful. But it's Japan specific. So think about like safety risks that you might have in a different region, and what are the things that you monitor in order to be aware of those. And in Japan, it is literally multiple apps around tsunamis and weather itself being something that we all learn for safety.
Yeah.
But also, like, I think parts of the Caribbean have rightfully earned a reputation as not being safe. And being informed on that so you know where to and not go is also really important. How do you figure it out? I feel like a lot of Americans maybe get scared of the unknown, and if you haven't traveled a lot outside of your home country, that can feel intimidating. And great places to start and research that are actually not the State Department, because they tend to paint countries with one brush when it's really so much more nuanced. And the same thing with the CDC, where don't go to Colombia because you'll get yellow fever. Well, that's like way up in this one part of Colombia, on the coast where you're going to go as a cruiser, you're fine. Don't worry about it. But getting beyond headline level information about a place so that you understand it.
Have you found that social media connections have helped you in these far-flung locations? Have you discovered that that's a resource for super local intel?
So in the Caribbean, Facebook groups exist for every country that are cruiser specific, and they can be a really helpful place to get safety information. So for example, if we're headed down chain in the Eastern Caribbean, I would probably look up to see what's the vibe on dinghy theft in different island groups. Actually, it's the Caribbean. I would do the lift it, lock it, or lose it philosophy and always have our dinghy secured. But you know about what places are relative risk by going into some of these Facebook groups and doing a keyword search. You also have an incredible tool called the Caribbean Safety and Security Net. And they just updated their website, and I don't know the URL off to my head, but highly Googleable. CSSN, Caribbean Safety and Security Net. And they have tracked firsthand reports over years so that you can look at, for example, let's say St. Lucia, a place that has a really checkered history for safety, and look at have events occurred and when, and get like a heat map that shows you where is it petty theft versus actual violent crime. And if there's violent crime in it, and there's more than one, it feels maybe not random. And that's a place that we probably wouldn't choose to go. People do, but you can at least get informed and make a personal choice on it.
The social networking has a downside too, because there are groups where things just spiral out of control. Somebody posts something, and then it's this barrage of negative comments. So while they have an upside, I personally normally can't stand them because of how negative a lot of the groups are, or bad information gets kicked down. Somebody in Mexico will be like, "Oh, you can't go to this place. We just had this awful experience. Everybody should stay away." And you know that person, and you know they're kind of obnoxious or a jerk, and they probably caused the event, and knowing that we've been to the same place and had no issues whatsoever. So don't take anything from, I think, the social world at full value. Just take it as a data point and collect more information. I think a big part of what we love for cruising is that it's life unscripted, meaning we're not following the same pattern every single day. It's new. You go to a new place, you have to figure out where the grocery store is and where to buy the cat food for our cat kid now. And so that unscriptedness means you have to figure things out. And if you take knowledge based on hearsay and a source that's 3 or 4 people away from you, it could be really bad information giving you a false reality of what that place is like. An example is when we were in Australia and getting ready to go cruising again, we were going up to Southeast Asia, and Behan said, "I think we should go through Papua New Guinea."
Oh man, I was so excited to go to Papua New Guinea.
I was like, "No way, we're going to die if we go to Papua New Guinea," because
it has a terrible reputation. It's like Americans who've never been to Mexico think Mexico's full of cartels and dangerous. And yes, we did just have a big event, but
it's
actually
incredibly
super
unusual.
Safe.
Yeah, and
most of the time.
Behan's like, "I think Papua New Guinea would be awesome." I said, "You figure out how to make it a safe path, and then we'll talk about it." Not that what I said was going to happen, but we have to agree on everything.
We have to agree. And so I had to sell it to him, and I had to do a lot of due diligence. But I figured out how, because again, just like you can't, go with the State Department's painting a country with one brush, you've got to learn about the nuances and why and how to comport yourself. And in Papua New Guinea, it was actually pretty specific around safe and unsafe places, and then how to go and meet the chief and bring a gift and ask him some questions and in order to establish whether or not a given anchorage was a safe place.
And by Behan's ability to decode where was clearly not safe and where was safe, and then the way that we were in that place, we spent a little over 3 months in Papua New Guinea, and it was an otherworldly experience because we go to an island that didn't have a single electric source on it. They were living in thatched huts, and
But
they
this
had
is like normal in this part of Papua New Guinea, right?
yeah,
There's no utilities, there's no sewage or fresh water, or I mean,
if
the sewage system is like there's a thatched hut that with a walkway that goes out over the water in the bay, and so you just go to your that's where people go to do
if
their
they
business.
didn't make it, grow it, or catch it, they didn't have it. And to talk to people that are living a way of life that for us is
So
ancient
different.
and is so different was epic. And like our kids, what they came away with from that experience and talking to
Oh, what we
people.
did just and now that some of them have actually we've been able to stay in touch with people. First it was through literally a friend with an HF radio would show up at the same island and we'd left our like contact information, with the friends we'd made there and they could get in touch with us this way. Well, now they've, migrated to better connected islands and we're Facebook friends. Like it's just wild how the world has changed in that chunk of time.
Yeah.
But another way is, so like a couple of our kids are queer, and we work with a number of people in our coaching community who are part of LGBTQIA plus community, and how do they figure out like where can they be safe? Because some countries are legit not safe to be a queer person, and we have one, two, three, four, five trans members of our coaching community as well, and to help them also decode. Frankly, they are often much more dialed in than we are to what resources are available to figure out if a given country is safe or not safe, and or a region is safe or not safe, and whether or not they would choose to go. But then they've also become almost their own little network. So I'm thinking of one family of two moms that have two girls, and so they were trying to figure out were there islands in the Caribbean that they should skip because of the scrutiny that they might get, and the choices around that. It's a hard thing for us to be able to advise on, but we could at least say, here's some really good resources that show you from the standpoint of both the literal laws um, and then the actual practices of how people tend to get treated. You might, for yourself, color code whether a place is one you want to visit or not. Overwhelmingly, despite some really unreasonable laws, most of the Caribbean is a really safe place to be. I don't know as much about other, like the Med. We don't haven't been in the Med. Southeast Asia and actually Oceania tend to be really safe places for the most part.
Yeah. I think like uh, uh, anytime you're traveling, do research, understand where you're going,
Mhm.
route planning, and all the things associated with that for the cruising context
Mhm.
is understanding the destination, the weather, security and safety hazards, things like that. Very important part of it.
Wow. Okay. Is there anything final from anyone here? Um, Anyone want to chime in? Final questions, comments, anything? Okay. Wow, this has been great. I hope you all got something out of this, many things or one thing that was important to you. So we're really happy that you joined us and thank you so much. It means a lot to us that you attended and we really thank Jamie and Behan not only for being here, but for spreading the word with your people and your followers about tonight. We clearly got a lot of your friends here tonight, so that was terrific.
Thank you
So
so much for having us. It was really fun to be able to talk about stuff, and we appreciate getting to be part of this series. Thank you, Ellen.
it's been just great, and I hope that some of these folks will reach out to you, sailingtotem.com. If you have these kinds of aspirations and you need a level-headed, objective take on your planning and some guidance, please reach out to Sailing Totem and ask for
Yeah, we're
their
happy to